fall asleep to the entire story of the Byzantine Empire. In the slow breath of twilight, when the sun slips behind distant hills and the sky becomes a veil of deepening indigo, the ancient city of Byzantium stirs, not yet as the world would come to know it, but as a fragile promise at the threshold of history. Here, where Europe and Asia lean together like old friends, the waters of the Bosporus murmur their endless song, a liquid thread connecting the past and the future, the mortal and the divine. It is in this liminal moment, poised between the fading echoes of Rome's ancient glory and the uncertain dawn of a new empire, that the story of Byzantium begins. Not with clashing swords or the thunder of armies, but with the quiet unfolding of a destiny whispered by the gods and written in the stones of time. The empire's roots burrow deep into the soil of an old world, where the grandeur of Rome had once stretched from the misty hills of Britain to the sunlit sands of Egypt. Yet the mighty empire, like a vast tree weathered by storms and seasons, had begun to falter, its branches heavy with the weight of centuries and the shadows of invaders pressing ever closer. The year is 330 AD, and the Emperor Constantine, a man both mortal and mythic, stands at a crossroads. He has dreamed of a new Rome, a city reborn on the shores of the East, where the sun rises and the ancient gods still whisper among olive groves and marble temples. Constantinople will be his vision made flesh, a shining jewel of civilization, a beacon of order and faith amid the chaos of a changing world. But the call to build this new empire is also a summons to a deeper trial, one that will test not only armies and rulers, but the very soul of humanity. Byzantium, as it will come to be called, is a city of paradoxes, a place where the sacred and the secular entwine, where the past is a living ghost and the future an uncertain light. It is a realm where emperors claim divine right and monks chant in the shadow of towering basilicas, where artisans carve holy icons and generals march beneath banners embroidered with both the cross and the eagle. Here, at the dawn of this new age, time itself seems to fold, the ancient world whispering its final secrets as a new civilization awakens, forged in fire, faith, and the relentless march of history. The stones of Byzantium hold these stories, silent yet speaking, echoes of emperors and heretics, of triumph and ruin, of a faith that would shape the world for 1,000 years and beyond. As the city rises from the ruins of empire, so too does a story unfold, one that will span centuries, filled with divine intrigue, mortal courage, and the eternal quest for meaning in a world ever on the brink of change. And so begins the long, sacred journey, a journey through time, memory, and myth, where the fate of Byzantium will be revealed not only in battles and crowns, but in the quiet heartbeats of those who lived, loved, and believed beneath its soaring domes. In the silence before the storm, the empire whispers its call to us still, to listen, to remember, and to understand the deep mystery of a kingdom caught between the fading light of an old world and the birth of a new one. In the misty cradle of the ancient world, where the seas meet the lands like a whispered secret, the city of Byzantium took its first breaths, born not from conquest or sudden command, but from the steady pulse of centuries, a quiet sentinel at the crossroads of empires, watching empires rise and fall like the tides themselves. Long before the name Byzantium graced the lips of poets or the annals of history, there stood a small Greek colony upon the shores of the Bosporus, founded by settlers from Megara. They chose this place for its beauty and its promise, a narrow strait where the waters of the Black Sea flowed into the shimmering Aegean, a natural bridge between continents and cultures. Here, the air smelled of salt and pine, and the rhythms of the sea spoke of distant lands and unseen horizons. This humble city was no mere footnote in history. Byzantium's very stones were soaked with the breath of the gods. Poseidon's salt spray, Athena's wisdom whispered through olive branches, and the steady march of mortals who labored in the shadow of Olympus. It was a place where human endeavor met divine mystery, where traders and sailors mingled with priests and philosophers. As centuries passed, Byzantium endured the sweeping currents of time, conquered and reclaimed, a jewel coveted by kings and empires. Its strategic position made it a prize, a guardian of the narrow gate between east and west. It was a city of merchants and soldiers, a mosaic of tongues and traditions, each layer adding to the rich tapestry of its identity. But the true awakening of Byzantium came in the twilight of Rome's grandeur. The vast empire, stretched thin across continents, began to unravel. The city of Rome itself, ancient and battered, was no longer the unshakable heart of the world. Emperors faced relentless pressures, from barbarian invasions, internal strife, and the shifting sands of faith and power. In this crucible of change, Emperor Constantine rose, a figure both earthly and transcendent, a man who would hear the sacred call and answer it with the founding of a new city destined to become the heart of a new empire. In 330 AD, he consecrated Byzantium as Nova Roma, the new Rome, imbuing it with the legacy of the past and the promise of a new order. But this new city was more than bricks and mortar. It was a symbol, a bridge not only of geography but of spirit. Here, the Roman law met Christian faith. The Greek intellect met Eastern mystery. Here, the ancient gods made way for the Christian God, yet the echoes of myth and legend still breathed beneath the surface, shaping belief and identity. Byzantium would be a living paradox, an empire rooted in tradition, yet always evolving, a place where the sacred and the profane danced beneath gilded domes, where the whispers of prophets mingled with the strategies of generals. Its origins tell us not just of a city, but of a transformation, the birth of an idea that history and myth, faith and power, civilization and empire are forever intertwined. Byzantium stands as a testament to the resilience of human spirit and the enduring quest for meaning amid the shifting sands of time. And so, as the sun sets over the Bosporus once more, the quiet city awakens to its destiny. A destiny written in stars and scripture, in stone and blood, in the timeless dance of empires that is the story of Byzantium. The dawn of Byzantium was not merely the laying of stones or the drawing of walls, but a profound turning of the world's axis, a sacred turning whispered by fate and carved into the dreams of an emperor. Constantine, crowned not only by earthly power, but by divine mandate, stood upon this ancient shore with eyes that saw beyond the present moment. In his vision, Byzantium would rise as a city unlike any other, a new Rome, radiant and eternal, a sanctuary for a civilization seeking rebirth amid the fading echoes of an old age. The air was thick with salt and promise as the imperial procession crossed the Bosporus, moving towards the future carved from the remnants of the past. This was no mere act of politics. It was a sacred rite, a consecration of a place that would become the axis mundi of a world poised between myth and history. Constantine's new Rome was both fortress and sanctuary, a place where the divine met the mortal in an eternal embrace. The city's walls rose, not just to defend against armies, but to protect an idea, that order and faith might prevail in a world fraying at the edges. Every stone laid, every basilica built, breathed with the pulse of a new age. The great palace, the hippodrome echoing with the cheers of chariot races, and the grandeur of the Hagia Sophia yet to come, each would become a symbol, a monument to the empire's sacred destiny. Yet the founding of Byzantium was also the founding of a paradox. Here the old gods had retreated, yet their shadows lingered. Ancient temples repurposed, pagan rituals quietly remembered beneath Christian prayers. The city would become a crucible of cultures and creeds, where East and West intertwined like the braided threads of a tapestry. The empire that rose around Constantinople was not merely Roman, it was Byzantine, an entity that would carry Rome's legacy yet transform it, adding layers of complexity, mysticism, and resilience. The laws of Rome were still the backbone, yet they bent and shifted, like light through stained glass, shaped by centuries of Eastern wisdom and the rising tide of Christian theology. As the first flickering lamps illuminated the streets, the city breathed in its new identity, a slow awakening to the burdens and blessings of empire. It was a place where emperors were seen as God's representatives on earth, where faith was inseparable from power, and where every act, from grand ceremony to whispered prayer, was laden with meaning. But the empire's foundations were fragile, forged not only in stone but in the hearts of its people. Soldiers, priests, artisans, and traders, each carrying their own hopes and fears, each shaping the empire's unfolding story. Byzantium was born amid the murmur of possibility and the shadows of uncertainty, a kingdom that would stand for centuries yet always feel the weight of its destiny pressing upon it. The city, perched at the edge of two worlds, became a beacon and a battleground, a living monument to the eternal tension between past and future, mortal ambition and divine will. In this delicate balance, Byzantium's story truly began. A story of grandeur and vulnerability, of light and shadow, of an empire that would shape the very soul of history. And so, beneath the stars that had watched over Rome and now gazed down upon Byzantium, a new chapter was written, slow, sacred, and eternal. In the heart of Byzantium, where land and sea clasped as if in eternal embrace, the city pulsed like a living organism, its veins the bustling streets, its breath the whispering waters of the Golden Horn and Bosporus. To walk here was to hear the murmurs of centuries, the rhythm of life and empire flowing through every stone and shadow. Constantinople was not merely a city, it was the very artery through which the lifeblood of the Byzantine world flowed. Traders from distant shores came bearing silks and spices, gold and glass, their footsteps mingling with the prayers of monks and the clatter of horsemen preparing for distant wars. The city's marketplaces throbbed with voices and colors, a living tapestry woven from the threads of countless peoples, Greek, Armenian, Syrian, Slavic, and more. At the center stood the great palace, a marvel of artistry and power, where emperors sat draped in purple robes, their eyes reflecting the weight of divine authority and earthly responsibility. To rule Byzantium was to balance on the knife's edge between heaven and earth, to wield a scepter blessed by God while guarding against the relentless tides of ambition and betrayal. Yet beneath this splendor, the city was a crucible of contradictions. Its grandeur cast long shadows, narrow alleys where whispers of heresy and conspiracy coiled like serpents. Sacred churches filled with golden icons, whose silent gaze held secrets of faith and fear. Here, tradition and innovation danced an uneasy waltz, each step reshaping the soul of the empire. The city's walls rose mighty and unyielding, guardians against the endless tides of enemies, Goths, Huns, Persians, and later Arab armies, each seeking to break the city's defiant heart. Yet the true strength of Byzantium was not in stone alone, but in the resilience of its people, who found in their faith and their culture a shield as enduring as any fortress. Beneath the great domes of Hagia Sophia, whose construction would later reach toward the heavens like a prayer carved in marble and gold, the empire's soul was forged. Here, theology and art merged in a sacred dialogue, echoing the ancient mysteries and heralding the Christian future. The shimmering mosaics and whispered liturgies bound the city's past to its destiny, a holy covenant inscribed in light. But the pulse of Byzantium extended beyond the city walls. Roads and rivers, ports and fortresses stretched across continents, carrying the heartbeat of empire into distant provinces. From the deserts of Syria to the forests of the Balkans, from the islands of the Aegean to the banks of the Danube, the empire's reach was both a blessing and a burden, a fragile web spun between ambition and decay. In the slow turning of days and nights, Constantinople became more than a city. It became a symbol of endurance amid chaos, of faith amid uncertainty, of a civilization's unyielding hope. It was here, in the quiet murmur of waves against the harbor, in the flicker of candlelight upon ancient icons, that the spirit of Byzantium truly lived, a city alive with history, mystery, and the sacred dance of time itself. Constantinople's pulse was the heartbeat of an empire that would echo through the ages, long after its stones had crumbled and its rulers had faded into legend. In the deep quiet of dawn, as the city of Constantinople stirred beneath a pale sky, the empire's pulse quickened with the fervor of an audacious vision. From the throne of imperial power rose Justinian, a ruler as relentless as the tides, as ambitious as the soaring domes that would bear his name. His dream was vast and resplendent, to reclaim the lost grandeur of Rome, to weave a tapestry of law, faith and conquest that would endure through the ages. Justinian's empire was more than a realm of borders and armies. It was a living testament to the eternal dance between glory and burden. The weight of imperial ambition pressed upon him like the heavy gold crown, yet his gaze was fixed beyond the horizon, where the ghosts of Rome's past whispered their longing for renewal. Under his watchful eye, the empire stretched its limbs once more. The crimson banners fluttered over distant shores, North Africa's sun-baked sands, Italy's war-torn plains, and the rugged coasts of Hispania. Each conquest was a step in the sacred journey to resurrect the ancient order, a reaffirmation that Byzantium was the rightful heir to Rome's undying legacy. But glory, like a flame, casts shadows. The campaigns were drenched in sweat and blood, the earth soaked with the lives of soldiers and civilians alike. The Gothic wars ravaged Italy, turning cities into ruins and hope into dust. Yet through the devastation rose monuments of faith and culture, the crowning jewel being the Hagia Sophia, a sanctuary where heaven and earth met in shimmering mosaics and soaring arches, a cathedral of light that seemed to hold the very breath of God. Justinian's rule was not merely marked by conquest, but by law and wisdom. The Corpus Juris Civilis, his codification of Roman law, sought to impose divine order upon human affairs, a foundation stone for justice that would echo through centuries. This sacred code was more than legislation. It was an attempt to shape the moral soul of the empire, to bind the people with a shared sense of righteousness and purpose. Yet, beneath the splendor, the empire trembled. Plague swept through the cities, a shadow that turned streets into silent corridors of grief. Revolts flared in distant provinces, the cracks of unrest threatening the fragile unity. And in the courts of power, intrigue and suspicion wove a tangled web that could ensnare even the most steadfast ruler. In Justinian's era, Byzantium revealed its paradox, an empire reaching for the stars, even as it grappled with the shadows of mortality and impermanence. His dream was both magnificent and tragic, a reminder that the pursuit of greatness is forever entwined with sacrifice. As the sun set behind the marble domes and spires, casting long shadows over the city's ancient stones, Byzantium stood proud yet fragile, a beacon of civilization caught in the eternal flux between creation and decay. And so the empire's tale deepened, a story of dreams carved in stone and blood, of faith tested by fire, and of a people forever striving to grasp the divine through the mortal coil. Section 6. The Sacred Flame. Faith, Icons, and the Soul of Byzantium. Amid the grandeur of marble palaces and the thunder of armies, it was the quiet, flickering flame of faith that truly illuminated the Byzantine world. In the sacred hush of candlelit churches, the people of the empire found not only solace but the very essence of their identity, a divine connection woven through prayer, ritual, and the shimmering presence of icons. Byzantium's faith was no mere inheritance. It was a living fire nurtured by centuries of theological struggle and sacred vision. The Christian God, once a whisper on the lips of persecuted believers, now stood at the heart of empire, a radiant force guiding emperors and peasants alike, shaping law, art, and life itself. But faith in Byzantium was never simple. It was a flame tended carefully, yet fiercely contested. The icons, holy images painted upon wood and stone, became the focus of devotion and controversy alike. These sacred images were windows to the divine, believed to carry the presence of the saints and Christ himself. To gaze upon them was to glimpse the eternal, to enter a space where heaven touched earth. Yet the very power of icons stirred fierce storms within the empire. The iconoclast controversy, like a shadow passing through sacred halls, questioned the use and meaning of these images. Were they idolatry, a betrayal of the true faith, or were they vessels of grace, conduits of divine mystery? This struggle was more than theological. It was a reflection of Byzantium's soul. The empire balanced precariously between tradition and reform, between East and West, between the earthly and the divine. Emperors, patriarchs, and common folk all grappled with these questions, their debates echoing in basilicas and marketplaces alike. The resolution of this conflict was not merely a victory of doctrine, but a reaffirmation of the empire's sacred mission. The restoration of icons was a moment of rebirth, a rekindling of the spiritual flame that illuminated Byzantium's path through the darkening centuries. In the soft glow of the chapel's light, the faithful saw beyond the temporal struggles toward a vision of eternity. The mosaic saints, their faces serene and radiant, seemed to watch over the city, whispering ancient truths in colors that time could not fade. Faith was the silent architect of Byzantium's resilience. It bound the empire together when swords faltered and walls crumbled, a sacred thread weaving mortal lives into a tapestry of meaning that transcended the passing of empires. And so, beneath the vaults of sacred spaces, amidst chants and incense, Byzantium's heart beat strong, a kingdom shaped by divine fire, holding fast to the mysteries that gave life to its people and purpose to its endless story. In the heart of Byzantium, where the golden light of dawn brushed against domes and minarets, the imperial court came alive like a sacred stage upon which the eternal drama of power was enacted. Here, in the shadow of Constantinople's great walls, the emperor moved not merely as a man, but as a living symbol, the earthly embodiment of divine will and cosmic order. The emperor's presence was a ritual, a dance steeped in centuries of tradition and myth. Draped in robes woven with gold and purple, he was both priest and sovereign, the bridge between heaven and earth. His word was law, his gestures imbued with meaning, his every step echoing the sacred harmony that held the empire together. The palace itself was a labyrinth of symbolism. Marble pillars rose like the columns of the cosmos, while intricate mosaics told stories of saints and martyrs, victories and divine favor. To enter the great palace was to cross into a realm where time bent beneath the weight of eternity, where the mortal and the divine were woven into a seamless tapestry. Ceremony was the empire's lifeblood. The coronation was more than a political event. It was a sacred anointing, a moment when the emperor was crowned by God's grace and the prayers of the church. Every festival, every audience, every public appearance was choreographed to affirm the emperor's role as God's chosen shepherd. Yet power in Byzantium was fragile, a double-edged sword forged in the fire of both reverence and suspicion. The court was a place of intrigue where allies became rivals and whispers carried the weight of daggers. The throne was coveted and contested, a seat where loyalty was both currency and curse. the emperor's divine right was not granted without cost. To rule was to carry the burdens of justice and mercy, to navigate the treacherous waters of diplomacy and war. Emperors like Justinian and Heraclius bore the weight of their people's hopes and fears, their victories celebrated as triumphs of faith, their defeats mourned as divine chastisement. In this sacred dance, the empire itself was both performer and audience, caught in the eternal interplay of light and shadow, order and chaos. The imperial court was a mirror reflecting the grandeur and fragility of Byzantium, a kingdom where the divine and the mortal met in a fleeting, shining moment. As candles flickered in the evening hush and the city settled into the silence of night, the emperor's gaze swept over Constantinople, a ruler both humbled and exalted by the immense task before him. In this quiet moment, the sacred dance of power continued, an endless cycle of hope and fear, glory and sacrifice. Byzantium's story was not only carved in stone and ink, but lived in the delicate, luminous rituals that bound its people to their emperor and their emperor to the heavens. The winds of the east carried whispers of a storm that would test the very soul of Byzantium. Beyond the shimmering horizons where the sun rose over distant mountains, the mighty Persian Empire gathered its forces, its ambitions burning bright like a forge heating steel. The stage was set for a trial by fire, a clash not only of armies, but of worlds, belief and endurance. For decades, the borderlands between Byzantium and Persia simmered with tension, a fragile line drawn across arid plains and rugged hills. It was here that the empire's strength would be measured, where the ideals of Rome would face the fierce traditions of Persia, a kingdom as ancient and proud as the empire itself. The wars that followed were brutal and unrelenting, a dance of siege engines, arrows, and steel beneath a sky heavy with smoke and the cries of the fallen. Cities like Antioch and Dara became battlegrounds, their stones soaked with the blood of soldiers and civilians, their ruins echoing with lamentations. Yet amid the devastation, the empire's spirit refused to break. Byzantine generals, skilled and resolute, marshaled their legions with a blend of strategy and faith, invoking both the wisdom of ancient Rome and the protection of the Christian God. The emperor, a beacon amid chaos, guided his people with the solemn conviction that their struggle was more than political. It was sacred. These wars carved deep scars into the empire's landscape and psyche. Fortresses rose like sentinels along the frontier, churches were built to honor the fallen, and prayers wove through the air like incense. The conflict forged a new resilience, hardening Byzantium's heart even as it mourned its losses. But beyond the clash of swords, the Persian Wars revealed a profound truth about the empire's destiny, that its survival depended not only on might, but on the unity of faith, culture, and the unyielding will to endure. Byzantium was not simply an empire of land and law. It was a living covenant between past and future, mortal and divine. As the smoke cleared and the armies withdrew, the empire stood battered but unbroken, its flame flickering but alive. The Persian Wars were a crucible, a fiery passage through which Byzantium emerged transformed, tempered by trial, bound by faith, and poised to face the storms yet to come. And so, beneath the vast, silent heavens, the empire's story continued, a sacred journey through shadow and light, forever shaped by the fires of war and the enduring hope of peace. In the silence that followed the thunder of battle, a darker, unseen enemy crept quietly through the bustling streets and tranquil villages of Byzantium. It came not on the wings of armies, but on the breath of rats and the whispers of the wind, a shadow that would stretch across the empire's soul, testing its endurance in a way no sword or siege could. The plague, known later as the Plague of Justinian, descended like a silent specter, an invisible hand sifting through the lives of emperors and peasants alike. It swept through Constantinople's marble avenues, threading sorrow through the crowded marketplaces and sacred basilicas, turning vibrant life into hushed mourning. This scourge was more than a disease. It was a rupture in the sacred order, a reminder of human fragility beneath the veneer of imperial might. The empire, so accustomed to the certainty of law and faith, found itself face to face with the mysterious and the merciless. The plague did not distinguish between the powerful and the meek. It took the strong generals and the humble mothers with equal indifference. Streets once alive with the murmur of commerce grew silent. The steady rhythm of daily life faltered as grief and fear wove a heavy shroud. The imperial court, too, was touched. Justinian himself bore the weight of this suffering, his vision for renewal clouded by the shadow of loss. Yet amid the despair, a quiet resilience blossomed. The people turned to prayer and ritual, seeking solace in the divine and strength in community. Monks and healers labored tirelessly, tending to the sick and whispering hope into the darkened corners of homes. The plague became a crucible of faith, a test of the empire's spiritual heart. Philosophers and theologians pondered the meaning of this catastrophe. Was it divine punishment, a cosmic trial, or a mysterious part of the great cycle of life and death? Their words echoed through the halls of learning and the quiet cloisters of monasteries, searching for understanding where none seemed to come. The plague of Justinian left scars deeper than flesh. It carved sorrow into the collective memory of Byzantium, a reminder of mortality's relentless grip. Yet it also forged a deeper bond among the living, a shared endurance that would carry the empire through centuries of trial. And so, beneath the heavy veil of loss and silence, Byzantium's story grew more profound. A tale not only of power and conquest, but of fragile humanity, flickering faith, and the slow, sacred dance with death itself. In the wake of devastation and plague, when the empire's heart beat unevenly beneath the weight of loss, a new dawn quietly stirred. A slow flowering of culture, faith and art that would become Byzantium's enduring gift to the world. It was an age where the empire's spirit, tempered by trial, reached toward the sublime, weaving light into the very fabric of its being. The halls of learning, once dimmed by war and sorrow, now echoed with the voices of scholars and poets, philosophers and theologians. Their words were not mere echoes of antiquity, but living flames, rekindling the wisdom of Greece and Rome while infusing it with the radiant faith of Christendom. The scrolls and codices they crafted bore witness to a civilization wrestling with the eternal questions of existence, of divinity, and of the human soul's journey. Art flourished as well, transforming the sacred into the eternal. The golden mosaics that adorned churches shimmered with a light that seemed to pulse with the divine breath. Saints and angels gazed from walls with serene, timeless eyes, their faces both earthly and celestial, windows into a world where heaven and earth intertwined. Byzantine music filled the air, its chants weaving a sonic tapestry that lifted the spirit beyond the confines of the mortal realm. In the flickering candlelight of monasteries and cathedrals, the faithful found a sanctuary not only from the chaos of the outside world, but a pathway to transcendence. This cultural flowering was not mere decoration, but a profound expression of Byzantium's identity, a civilization that found in beauty and intellect a sacred purpose, a way to honor the divine mystery that shaped their lives. It was a rebirth born from the ashes of struggle, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Yet this golden age was also shadowed by tension, the ever-present threats from without and within. The empire's borders were restless, its people divided by theological debates and political intrigue. But even as darkness gathered, the light of culture shone steadfast, a beacon that would inspire not only Byzantium, but generations beyond. In this age, Byzantium was not merely an empire of stone and sword, but a luminous realm where the sacred and the mortal danced in eternal embrace. The story of the empire deepened here, a sacred testament to the power of faith, art, and knowledge to transform the human experience. And so, beneath the glow of golden mosaics and the echo of sacred hymns, Byzantium's soul whispered its timeless song, a melody of light amid shadows, a hope that would endure long after empires fall. The winds of change swept across the ancient world like a restless tide, carrying with them a new force that would reshape the destiny of empires. From the deserts of Arabia rose a faith and a people whose fervor blazed like the sun, the early Islamic caliphates. Their rise was swift and unyielding, a spiritual and political awakening that reached across lands once held by Byzantium, stirring both fear and fascination in the heart of the empire. To the Byzantines, these newcomers were at once adversaries and enigmas. The crescent moon and the cross now marked the sky's eternal canvas, symbols locked in a silent, relentless contest for the soul of the Eastern Mediterranean. The caliphate's armies surged like desert storms, their riders swift as falcons, their faith burning bright with a fierce conviction that echoed Byzantium's own sacred fire. Cities that had thrived under Byzantine rule, Damascus, Jerusalem, Alexandria, shifted beneath new banners, their ancient stones bearing witness to the ever-turning wheel of history. The empire's borders contracted, and with each loss came a shadow of mourning, yet also a deepening resolve. Byzantium was no stranger to survival. Its spirit was forged in endurance, and this new epoch demanded adaptation and strength. The clashes were not merely of swords and shields, but of cultures, faiths, and worldviews. Byzantium's Christian Orthodox tradition faced the rise of Islam with cautious respect and wary eyes, recognizing in this new faith both a challenge and a kindred devotion to the one God. Diplomacy, trade, and occasional alliances threaded through the conflict, revealing a complex tapestry far richer than simple enmity. The empire's emperors became both warriors and statesmen, weaving strategies that combined martial prowess with shrewd negotiation. Heroes like Emperor Heraclius emerged, carrying the burden of defense while nurturing the faith and identity that held Byzantium's heart together. Beyond the battlefield, this encounter sparked a profound cultural and intellectual exchange. Scholars translated works of philosophy and science. Merchants bridged worlds with silks and spices, and the borders between civilizations blurred in unexpected ways. In the crucible of confrontation, new ideas and art forms took shape, weaving a legacy that would influence both East and West. This era marked a turning point, a horizon where the empire confronted the relentless flow of history, embracing both its losses and its gifts. The crescent and the cross, locked in an eternal dance, became symbols of a shared destiny, a reminder that even in opposition, civilizations shape and reflect one another's souls. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the ancient walls of Constantinople, Byzantium stood resilient, a beacon of faith and culture amid a world forever in flux, poised to face the unfolding chapters of its sacred saga. Beneath the ever-watchful skies, Constantinople stood like a jewel cradled by the waters of the Bosporus, a city born of destiny, wrapped in stone and sea, a threshold between continents and epochs. Its great walls, vast and unyielding, rose like a sentinel's shield, guarding not merely an empire's capital, but the fragile dream of a civilization clinging to eternity. The Theodosian walls, crafted with the meticulous care of generations past, were more than fortifications. They were a testament to the empire's defiant heartbeat against the relentless tides of time and invasion. Layers of stone and mortar, towers like watchful eyes, and a moat carved from the earth itself, all converged to form a fortress that breathed strength and sacred purpose. Through centuries, these walls endured sieges that echoed like thunder across the ages, the pounding of battering rams, the screams of arrows, the smoke of fires that threatened to consume hope itself. They bore witness to the ebb and flow of empires rising and falling, a bulwark against the ceaseless storms of history. But the walls were not merely a barrier against the enemy without. They were a boundary between the temporal and the eternal. Within their embrace, the people of Constantinople wove their daily lives amidst bustling markets and sacred temples, their laughter and prayers mingling beneath the shadow of ramparts that whispered stories of resilience and faith. The fortress was also a symbol, a sacred geometry etched in stone that mirrored the empire's inner world, complex, layered, and steadfast. It was a physical manifestation of Byzantium's belief that the mortal realm could reflect divine order, that strength and beauty could coexist to protect a civilization's soul. Yet the walls were not impregnable. They bore the scars of betrayal, the weight of political intrigue, and the relentless pressure of changing times. Each breach, each threat, was a reminder of mortality's inescapable grasp and of the delicate balance between human endeavor and fate. In the twilight hush before dawn, when the city slept beneath the watchful moon, the walls stood silent but alive, guardians of dreams, keepers of memory. They held the empire's story in their stones, a slow and sacred pulse beating against the inevitable march of history. And so, the fortress of Constantinople endured, not only as stone and mortar, but as a living monument to Byzantium's eternal quest, to hold fast to a dream of unity, faith, and lasting meaning amid the ever-turning wheel of time. The year was heavy with omens as a vast storm gathered on the horizon, not of clouds, but of steel and fury, borne by the relentless tide of the Umayyad armies pressing westward. Constantinople, the heart of Byzantium, faced a trial unlike any before, a siege that would test the very limits of its walls, its faith, and its will to endure. For months, the city braced beneath a sky thick with smoke and the clangor of war. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and fire, the sound of catapults and battering rams rolling like thunder across the ramparts. The sea itself, once a protector, became a battleground as Byzantine ships clashed with the enemy's fleet, their wooden hulls creaking under the weight of desperation and resolve. Emperor Leo III, steadfast and resolute, moved through the city as both commander and shepherd, his presence a beacon amid the storm. His gaze carried the burden of an empire's fate, yet his voice calmed the hearts of soldiers and citizens alike. He understood that this siege was more than a battle for stone and land. It was a struggle for the soul of Byzantium, a moment suspended between history and myth. The defenders wielded not only sword and shield, but an ancient secret. Greek fire, a fierce and unquenchable flame that leapt from their ships and walls like the wrath of the gods themselves. This alchemical fire was a terror to the besiegers, turning the waters into a furnace and halting the tide of invasion. Days bled into weeks, the siege becoming a relentless test of endurance and spirit. Hunger gnawed at the city's belly, and the cries of the wounded rose alongside the prayers of the faithful. In churches dimly lit by trembling candles, priests invoked divine protection, their chants weaving a tapestry of hope amid despair. As the siege wore on, the defenders' courage hardened into a resolute shield, their unity a fortress as vital as stone. The city that once seemed on the brink of collapse found strength in shared sacrifice, the bonds of community and faith knitting tight against the looming darkness. When at last the Umayyad forces faltered and withdrew, the relief was like the first breath after drowning, a collective exhale that rippled through walls, streets, and hearts. Constantinople had stood not merely by the might of its walls, but by the fierce and sacred will of its people. The siege of 717 became legend, a story whispered in candlelit rooms and etched into the empire's memory as a triumph of resilience and divine favor. It was a reminder that even at the gates of destruction, Byzantium's flame endured, an eternal beacon against the gathering shadows. From the ashes of relentless siege and hardship, Byzantium stirred once more, awakening like a phoenix beneath the golden rays of a new dawn. The Macedonian dynasty, beginning with Emperor Basil I, breathed life into an empire weary but unbroken, ushering in a period of renewal that shimmered with hope and purpose. This was an age when the empire sought not just to defend itself, but to reclaim its ancient glory, to weave together threads of past grandeur with fresh vigor and vision. The courts and halls of Constantinople flourished, becoming centers where wisdom and creativity bloomed like wild flowers in spring. Artists and scholars, inspired by the revival of classical learning, infused their works with a radiant synthesis of Christian faith and Greco-Roman heritage. Illuminated manuscripts glowed with intricate designs. Philosophers pondered the mysteries of existence, and architects raised soaring domes and churches that seemed to reach toward the heavens themselves. But the Macedonian Renaissance was more than a cultural flowering. It was a resurrection of imperial ambition. The empire's borders pushed outward once again, reclaiming lands lost to centuries of turmoil. Armies marched beneath banners bright with the imperial eagle, weaving a tapestry of conquest and diplomacy that stretched from the Balkans to the eastern shores of the Mediterranean. Yet amid this resurgence, Byzantium remained a kingdom of paradox, a realm where faith and power intertwined, where the grandeur of empire met the humility of the cross. The emperor was both sovereign and servant, a ruler whose divine right was balanced by a sacred duty to his people and God. This delicate dance of light and shadow shaped the empire's destiny, casting long reflections that would ripple through history. The Macedonian era, with its golden mosaics and soaring cathedrals, was a time when Byzantium reclaimed its voice, speaking in a language that echoed across centuries. And as the sun set behind the city's walls, gilding the waters of the Bosporus in fire, Byzantium stood tall, a phoenix reborn, its flame steady and bright against the gathering dusk of the medieval world. Beneath the vaulted heavens, where prayers once rose as a single chorus, a quiet fracture began to ripple through the Christian world, a schism not of swords, but of spirit and soul. Byzantium and the Latin West, long bound by faith and empire, now found themselves drifting apart, like two stars caught in separate orbits around a fading light. The roots of this division stretched deep into centuries of history. Subtle tensions over doctrine, language, and authority intertwining like tangled vines. The question of the Pope's supremacy in Rome clashed with the Patriarch's authority in Constantinople, each claiming a sacred mantle that seemed to slip further from shared grasp. This schism was not merely theological debate. It was the unraveling of a unity forged in the fires of martyrdom and miracle. Icons became battlegrounds, councils turned to councils of conflict, and prayers whispered in different tongues echoed like distant echoes across the Christian world. For Byzantium, this division was both wound and revelation, a moment of profound loss, yet also of profound identity. The empire held fast to its traditions, its rituals shimmering with ancient wisdom, while the West charted a new course that would lead to crusades and cathedrals soaring toward heaven in stone and blood. The Great Schism of 1054 was the whispered breaking of a sacred vessel, a moment when the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches formally parted ways. It was a rupture that would echo through history, shaping geopolitics, culture, and faith for generations. Yet even as the churches divided, the spiritual quest remained, a yearning for unity, peace, and the divine mystery that surpasses all human divisions. Byzantium's soul carried this paradox: pride in its heritage, sorrow for its losses, and hope that one day the broken circle might be mended. In the shadow of this schism, the empire stood both diminished and defined, a beacon of ancient faith and enduring tradition, watching as the world beyond its walls changed forever. And so, beneath the sacred domes of Hagia Sophia, the story of Byzantium deepened, a tale of faith's fragile beauty, the weight of history, and the eternal search for wholeness in a fractured world. The dawn of the 13th century cast long shadows over Byzantium, shadows that would stretch into the very heart of its sacred city. The empire, once the unassailable jewel of Christendom, now faced a betrayal not from distant foes, but from those who bore the banner of the cross. The Crusaders, sworn warriors of faith, turned harbingers of devastation. The Fourth Crusade began as a mission to reclaim Jerusalem, a sacred pilgrimage cloaked in divine purpose. Yet the winds of fate carried this army away from the Holy Land, steering it instead toward Constantinople, the city where East and West converged in faith and power. The reasons were tangled in politics, debts, and fractured alliances, a tapestry of ambition and desperation that would unravel the empire's fragile peace. In 1204, the walls of Constantinople trembled under siege not from Muslim forces, but from Western knights. The city's magnificent churches, palaces, and libraries were breached and pillaged with a fury that stunned the world. The Hagia Sophia, temple of divine light, echoed with the clash of steel and the cries of despair. Priceless icons were shattered, sacred relics stolen, and the very soul of Byzantium seemed to fracture under the weight of this sacrilege. This was not merely a conquest, but a profound desecration, a wound inflicted by those who once called themselves brethren. The Latin occupiers carved the empire into shards, establishing a crusader kingdom atop Byzantine ruins, while the true heirs fled to distant corners, nursing the dying flame of their heritage. The fall of Constantinople in 1204 was a shattering moment, an eclipse of glory that cast the empire into darkness and exile. It was a painful reckoning with the fragility of power and the treacheries that can lurk within faith itself. Yet even in this abyss, the spirit of Byzantium endured, scattered but unbroken. From this crucible of loss, tales of resilience arose. The Empire of Nicaea, a beacon in exile, kindled hopes of restoration. Monks preserved ancient texts. Artists kept alive the sacred traditions through brush and chant. The story of Byzantium had not ended but transformed, its soul wandering through shadow in search of light. And so, beneath the ruins of a shattered city, the sacred journey continued. A slow, whispered prayer for redemption, a testament to endurance amid betrayal, and a promise that even the deepest night gives way to dawn. In the wake of Constantinople's fall, a city stripped bare and silenced by the clash of Western steel, the heart of Byzantium did not cease to beat. Far from the shattered walls and burning temples, in the modest city of Nicaea, a flicker of hope kindled a quiet flame. Here, amidst unfamiliar lands and diminished fortunes, the exiled empire wove its fragile tapestry of survival. Nicaea was no Constantinople, no gleaming capital of marble and gold, but it bore the spirit of Byzantium within its modest walls. The displaced emperor, along with courtiers, scholars, and clergy, gathered not only to rule, but to preserve the essence of their civilization, the traditions, the sacred rites, and the profound knowledge that had long defined their identity. This exile was not merely a retreat, but a crucible of renewal. In the libraries and scriptoria, monks labored tirelessly to copy manuscripts, safeguarding ancient texts that might have otherwise vanished beneath the chaos. The sacred chants of Orthodox liturgy rose again in humble churches, weaving a sonic thread between past and present. Though stripped of their great city, the Nicaean emperors held fast to the conviction that Constantinople would be reclaimed, that the empire's heart could be restored and its shattered glory reborn. They governed with a delicate hand, balancing diplomacy and military preparation, while nurturing the faith and culture that gave them strength. This period was also marked by a profound reflection on loss and identity. The empire in exile pondered the meaning of power without place, the endurance of faith without throne, and the resilience of a people uprooted yet unyielding. Their story became one of quiet courage, a slow, sacred journey through shadow toward a distant dawn. As the years passed, the flame in Nicaea grew steadier, fueled by hope and the enduring belief in Byzantium's sacred mission. Though the city lay far from the imperial splendor of Constantinople, its walls held the soul of an empire that refused to be extinguished. And so, in this exile, Byzantium's story deepened, an epic of loss and perseverance, where the fragile light of hope glimmered in the gathering dusk, promising that even from the darkest night, a new dawn might rise. Through the quiet years of exile, the pulse of Byzantium never faltered. From the modest courts of Nicaea, a determined spirit reached outward and upward, a slow gathering of strength that sought to reclaim what had been lost, not merely a city of stone, but the very heart of a civilization. The empire's leaders, tempered by hardship and sharpened by the bitter lessons of betrayal, began a long and patient march toward restoration. It was a journey woven with cautious diplomacy, careful alliances, and the unyielding resolve of an ancient people who knew that history's wheel turns relentlessly, carrying even the fallen back toward their destiny. By the middle of the 13th century, the moment of return drew near. The Latin rulers, weakened by their own fracturing and distant ambitions, found their grasp loosening on the once impregnable city. Byzantium's armies, though diminished from their former glory, pressed with steady purpose, their banners fluttering like prayers above the windswept fields. The city itself awaited, not just a place, but a living memory, its stones whispering the stories of emperors and saints, of triumphs and sorrows etched into its walls. The people of Constantinople, weary yet hopeful, yearned for the day when the sacred gates would open once more to their rightful heirs. In 1261, under the command of General Alexios Strategopoulos, the gates of Constantinople quietly yielded, not to thunderous siege, but to stealth and cunning. The city's liberation was swift, almost surreal, a return from exile that felt like a dream trembling into waking reality. Yet the city they reclaimed was scarred, its treasures plundered, its streets altered, its spirit tempered by years of foreign rule. The reconquest was not an end, but a beginning, a solemn call to rebuild and renew amidst the shadows of loss. The restoration of Constantinople reignited the empire's hope, even as it faced the complex challenges of a changing world. Byzantium was reborn in a fragile balance between past grandeur and uncertain future, carrying the weight of memory and the promise of resilience. And so, as the sun rose over the familiar waters of the Golden Horn, Byzantium's story marched onward, a testament to the enduring power of home, identity, and the relentless flow of time that carries all things back toward their true beginning. With Constantinople reclaimed, the Byzantine Empire breathed anew, but the breath was fragile, tinged with the chill of an approaching dusk. The golden hues of revival faded beneath the lengthening shadows of new and old threats, a somber reminder that even empires forged by faith and fire must one day confront the inevitable twilight. The world beyond Byzantium's walls had shifted, swirling with forces both relentless and indifferent. The rise of the Seljuk Turks, and later the formidable Ottoman Beylik, pressed like an encroaching storm on the empire's eastern borders. Their horsemen moved swiftly, like whispers of a coming night, their ambitions cast long and dark. Within, Byzantium wrestled with internal fractures. Political intrigue, courtly rivalries, and the ceaseless strain of maintaining an empire stretched thin across distant lands. Emperors came and went, each bearing the weight of a legacy both majestic and fragile, their crowns heavy with the burden of survival. The city of Constantinople, still radiant with its domes and mosaics, became a fragile jewel on the edge of oblivion. Its famed walls, once thought impregnable, bore the scars of countless battles, standing as silent witnesses to a civilization caught between the glory of its past and the uncertainty of its future. Yet even in this twilight, the soul of Byzantium flickered with stubborn light. Monks preserved sacred texts in candlelit monasteries. Artists crafted icons that shimmered with divine presence. The Orthodox Church offered solace and identity to a people facing the slow unraveling of their world. This was an age of quiet despair and fierce hope, where every day was a prayer whispered against the gathering storm. The empire's story was no longer one of expansion or conquest, but of holding fast, of weaving meaning from loss and dignity from decline. As the sun dipped low beyond the horizon, casting long shadows over the ancient city, Byzantium stood as a testament to the delicate dance between endurance and surrender, a sacred echo in the vast, unending saga of human history. The spring of 1453 dawned with a silence that carried the weight of centuries, a stillness pregnant with fate. Constantinople, the ancient city of golden domes and sacred shadows, stood as the final bastion of a fading empire, its walls weathered but proud against the encroaching tide. Beyond those walls, an immense force gathered, Ottoman banners fluttering like a dark storm, led by the young and fierce Sultan Mehmed II, whose eyes burned with a vision both of conquest and destiny. His army was a tide of steel and fire, a ceaseless wave determined to wash away the last vestiges of Byzantium's ancient glory. The city's defenders, few and weary, looked upon their shattered realm with both sorrow and fierce resolve. Among them, Emperor Constantine XI stood not merely as a ruler, but as a symbol, an embodiment of a civilization's final, unyielding heartbeat. His sword was not just a weapon, but a sacred trust wielded in defense of a dream now slipping toward darkness. For weeks, the Ottomans thundered against the Theodosian walls, their cannons belching fire and smoke, shaking the very foundations of a city that had withstood sieges for over a millennium. The air was thick with dust and desperation, the cries of the wounded mingling with prayers whispered beneath shattered arches. Inside Hagia Sophia, candles flickered like fragile stars as priests offered last rites and supplications, their voices rising in solemn harmony, echoes of a faith tested by fire and loss. The city was a crucible where time seemed to slow, each breath a fragile gift, each moment a precious defiance against the inevitable. Then, in the twilight hours of May 29th, the walls finally gave way. Ottoman forces poured through the breaches, a flood of shadow engulfing stone and soul. The last emperor fell in battle, his fate entwined with the fate of an empire that had endured for more than 1,000 years. Yet even in defeat, Constantinople's spirit was not extinguished. The city's sacred stones, its art, its faith, and its memory would ripple through history, inspiring awe, reflection, and longing. The fall was both an end and a beginning. A silent passage from one age to another, a meditation on mortality, legacy, and the eternal dance of empires. And so, as the sun set on the Byzantine world, it rose on a new horizon, one forever shaped by the echoes of a city that refused to be forgotten. The gates had fallen, the banners lowered, and the last echoes of battle faded into the heavy silence of a city transformed. Yet Constantinople, though conquered and changed, was not lost to the current of time. Its soul, woven from centuries of glory, faith and endurance, flowed onward, carried like a whispered secret into the worlds beyond. Under Ottoman rule, the city took on new names, new rhythms, and new colors. Yet the stones remembered. The domes of Hagia Sophia, once a sanctuary of Byzantine faith, now rose above the city as a testament to layered histories, where East met West in an eternal embrace of culture and belief. The city became a living palimpsest, each era inscribing its story over the last, yet never quite erasing the deep, sacred script beneath. Byzantium's legacy stretched far beyond its fallen walls. Its art, philosophy, and theology seeded the Renaissance flourishing in the West. Its scholars, fleeing the collapse, carrying scrolls and wisdom that would rekindle the fires of learning in distant lands. The intricate mosaics and icons, the solemn chants of Orthodox liturgy, and the empire's timeless architecture inspired generations, reminding humanity of a bridge between ancient worlds and the future. The Byzantine Empire, though no longer sovereign, lived on in memory and myth, a symbol of endurance against the tides of time, a reminder of the fragile beauty and tragic grandeur that define all great civilizations. Its story whispered through the corridors of history as a sacred parable of rise and fall, hope and loss, power and humility. And so, beneath the stars that had watched empires rise and crumble, Constantinople's spirit remained, a luminous thread woven into the vast tapestry of human meaning. It was a city of endings and beginnings, a place where the echoes of empire continue to resonate, inviting us to listen deeply to the eternal song of history. In the quiet spaces between stone and shadow, between legend and history, lies the true heart of Byzantium. Not merely an empire of walls and crowns, but a soul woven from memory and myth. It is here, in the sacred silence, that the eternal thread of Byzantine identity runs deepest, stretching across centuries like a whispered prayer. The empire's story is carried not just in the grand narratives of conquest or loss, but in the delicate rituals of everyday faith. The lighting of a candle before dawn, the solemn chant echoing beneath the domes, the icon's silent gaze that bridges heaven and earth. These small sacred acts knit a community together, a living testament to endurance beyond the passage of kings and empires. Myth and history dance together in Byzantine consciousness, a fusion where emperors become saints, battles transform into cosmic struggles, and the city of Constantinople itself is imagined as a new Jerusalem, both earthly and divine, a beacon in the dark wilderness of time. This mythopoetic vision carries the weight of hope and the inevitability of loss, a meditation on the fragile boundary between mortality and eternity. Memory here is a sacred flame, guarded fiercely against the ravages of forgetting. Stories are told and retold, not simply to recount the past, but to shape identity, to hold fast to a vision of what it means to be Byzantine, even as the world shifts and fades around it. It is a legacy not confined to history books, but alive in the hearts of those who carry the flame forward. In this sacred continuity, Byzantium's meaning unfolds like a slow, sacred breath, a reminder that all human stories are part of a greater cosmic rhythm, a tapestry where light and shadow, ruin and resurrection are forever entwined. And so the Byzantine soul whispers still, calling us to listen deeply to the echoes of empire, to the silence after the storm, and to the eternal dance of memory and myth that shapes the very essence of human meaning. As twilight deepens over the ancient city, a stillness falls, an invitation to journey inward, beyond the towering walls and gilded domes, into the shadowed realm where memory and myth entwine. This is the passage to Byzantium's underworld, a sacred descent into the hidden spaces where loss is mourned, and the soul confronts its deepest trials. Here, beneath the surface of history, the empire's ghosts wander, emperors cloaked in sorrow, poets whose voices fade into silence, and countless souls whose lives were woven into the city's fabric, only to be scattered by the winds of conquest and exile. They move like whispers among ruined churches and abandoned libraries, their stories half-remembered dreams. This underworld is not a place of death alone, but of transformation, a liminal space where the past is neither fully present nor entirely lost. It is a realm where the empire confronts its own mortality, wrestling with the shadows of betrayal, collapse, and exile, yet also glimpsing the faint glow of resurrection beyond the darkness. The descent mirrors the ancient journeys of heroes and gods, the catabasis of myth, where to emerge changed, one must first traverse the depths. Byzantium's underworld holds its own rites and mysteries, the silent prayers offered in candlelight, the fragile preservation of sacred texts, the echoes of hymns sung in hidden chambers. In this sacred twilight, time folds and blurs. Past and present mingle like ripples on the Bosporus, reminding us that every end holds within it the seed of a new beginning. The empire's spirit lingers in this threshold, neither lost nor found, calling us to witness the quiet dignity of endurance amid ruin. And so, as the city sleeps beneath the stars, Byzantium's journey into the underworld unfolds. A slow, meditative passage through shadow, loss, and the eternal hope that even in descent, the soul can find its way toward light. Within the dim chambers of Byzantium's twilight, where silence reigns like a sacred veil, a quiet army labors. The monks, the silent guardians of a fading empire's soul. Cloaked in simple robes and bound by vows of devotion, they become the living bridge between a glorious past and an uncertain future, their hands trembling with reverence as they trace ancient letters onto fragile parchment. In the flickering glow of oil lamps, the sacred task unfolds, the painstaking copying of manuscripts, the preservation of texts that hold the wisdom of philosophers, theologians, and poets long gone. Each stroke of ink is a prayer, each page a testament to the belief that knowledge is a flame meant to endure beyond the ruin of stone and empire. These manuscripts carry more than words. They hold the memory of a civilization, its laws, its stories, its dreams. Within their fragile pages lies the accumulated light of centuries, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Through their preservation, the monks weave a tapestry of continuity, ensuring that the whispers of Byzantium will not vanish into silence. Beyond the scriptoria, the monastic life itself becomes an act of resistance, a sanctuary where faith and culture intertwine, where the chants that fill stone chapels echo with the sacred rhythm of eternity. The monks embody a truth deeper than politics or power, that even in exile, in loss, there remains a spark of the divine within human hearts. Their labor is often unseen, their sacrifice is hidden beneath layers of history, yet without them, the fragile thread of Byzantine heritage might have snapped irreparably. They are the quiet custodians of memory, the keepers of light in a world growing dim. And so, as shadows lengthen over Constantinople and the empire's heartbeat slows, the monks persist, steadfast sentinels in the night, whispering prayers into the darkness, guarding the sacred flame that will one day ignite the future anew. In the shimmering half-light of Byzantine churches, where golden mosaics catch the flicker of candle flames like fragments of the divine, faith reveals itself not only in doctrine, but in art, a sacred dialogue between the seen and unseen, the mortal and eternal. Here, the soul of Byzantium breathes most vividly, woven from the colors and light of its sacred imagery. The icons, those silent faces gazing eternally, are more than paintings. They are windows into another realm, portals where heaven and earth meet in quiet reverence. Crafted with painstaking devotion, each tessera is a prayer cast in glass and stone, a meditation frozen in time. The saints and angels do not merely adorn walls, they inhabit a space where worship becomes an encounter, a sacred communion between humanity and the divine. This spirituality, at once intimate and cosmic, shaped the very identity of Byzantium. It was a world where the sacred permeated the mundane, where every gesture, every chant, Every glimmering mosaic was a thread in a tapestry of meaning that bound people to their gods, their emperors, and to one another. Yet within this beauty lay profound mystery and paradox, the tension between image and idolatry, between reverence and controversy. The iconoclast periods, moments of fierce conflict over the place of images in worship, revealed the empire's struggle to define the boundaries of the sacred. These conflicts were not merely theological disputes, but reflections of deeper questions about power, presence, and the nature of truth itself. Through all trials, the mosaic of Byzantine faith endured, a luminous testament to the human longing for transcendence amid the fleeting shadows of time. It is a legacy that whispers still through cracked walls and faded frescoes, inviting us to contemplate the sacred geometry of belief and the eternal dance between light and shadow. And so, in the quiet flicker of a candlelit chapel, Byzantium spirit sings, a hymn woven from stone and gold, echoing through the corridors of history, calling us to see beyond the surface and touch the divine. Beneath the glittering crowns and imperial robes, the Byzantine emperor bore a weight that transcended mere earthly rule, a burden woven from the threads of divine will and mortal frailty. To be emperor was to stand at the crossroads of heaven and earth, a living symbol of God's providence entrusted with the sacred task of guiding a civilization through the storms of time. This was not a throne of simple dominion, but a throne of spiritual gravity, where every decree echoed with cosmic significance, and every act of governance was a reflection of a divine order that linked the ruler to both the saints above and the people below. The emperor was the basileus, the anointed sovereign whose power was at once absolute and deeply circumscribed by faith. To rule Byzantium was to walk a narrow path between hubris and humility, between earthly ambition and spiritual obedience. Emperors were expected to be warriors and theologians, patrons of art and protectors of the church, their every gesture a sacred ritual that reinforced the unity of empire and faith. Yet this divine mandate was fraught with paradox and peril. History whispered of emperors brought low by pride or intrigue, of crowns tarnished by betrayal, and of the fragile line between mortal will and celestial destiny. Each ruler's story became a meditation on the nature of power, its grandeur and its transience, its glory and its inevitable decay. Through wars and councils, through splendor and exile, the emperors carried their burden with a mixture of grace and tragedy, embodying the eternal tension that lies at the heart of human governance, the desire to shape history and the awareness that all things pass beneath the inexorable gaze of time. And so, beneath the mosaics of saints and the arches of imperial halls, the emperor's burden endured, a solemn reminder that to hold power is to be both servant and sovereign, keeper of a fragile flame against the darkness. Beneath the vast heavens stretching over Constantinople, the city hummed quietly with the ceaseless movement of travelers, merchants, and pilgrims, a living crossroads where the worlds of East and West met in a delicate dance of exchange and transformation. Byzantium, perched at the nexus of continents, was more than an empire. It was a portal through which goods, ideas, and spirits flowed like the waters of the Bosporus itself. The Silk Road's ancient paths traced through desert sands and mountain passes, weaving threads of silk, spices, and precious metals into the fabric of Byzantine life. Yet the true wealth carried was often less tangible, the exchange of philosophies, religious beliefs, and artistic visions that enriched the empire's soul and shaped its unique identity. Here, Christian theology encountered the wisdom of Greek philosophers, while Eastern mysticism whispered alongside Byzantine liturgy. In the bustling markets, languages mingled like music, Latin and Greek, Persian and Arabic, each a thread in the rich tapestry of human connection. This mingling birthed a culture that was at once deeply rooted and endlessly expansive, a world where the sacred and the secular intertwined. The city's walls enclosed not only emperors and priests, but also diplomats and scholars whose journeys forged bridges across civilizations. Through Byzantium's gate, the echoes of distant empires found new life, their stories refracted through the prism of Byzantine perception, becoming part of an ever-evolving mythos. Yet this crossroads was also a place of tension, of clash and compromise, of shifting alliances and fragile peace. The empire's openness was both its strength and its vulnerability, a testament to the precarious balance between embracing the other and preserving the self. As twilight falls over the city, the spirit of Byzantium lingers in the mingling scents of spices and incense, in the quiet prayers whispered in many tongues, in the silent journey of ideas carried like precious cargo along the ancient roads. It is a reminder that civilizations are never islands but crossroads, where the threads of humanity are woven together into a shared, sacred story. As the centuries unfolded, the Byzantine Empire became a fading ember against the vast horizon of history, a fragile flame flickering amid the relentless winds of change. Yet, even as borders shrank and battles were lost, its spirit refused to be extinguished. It glowed quietly in the hearts of its people, in the rituals of faith, and in the enduring legacies woven into the fabric of later civilizations. Byzantium's story was no longer one of earthly power, but of transcendence, a symbol of resilience amid ruin, a reminder that empires may fall, but their essence lingers in unexpected forms. Its art, its liturgy, its law, and its philosophy seeped into the soils of Renaissance Europe, the Orthodox world, and even distant lands touched by the Eastern Orthodox Church. The Byzantine soul carried a profound awareness of impermanence balanced by an unyielding hope, a belief that through memory, through sacred tradition, the eternal might be glimpsed even in the midst of temporal loss. This paradox became its greatest gift, the understanding that history is a sacred cycle of death and rebirth, ruin and renewal. In monasteries hidden among rugged mountains, in churches still echoing with the chant of ancient hymns, Byzantium's flame flickered on, a quiet defiance against the void. Its story became a whisper passed from generation to generation, a meditation on the human condition, on the fragile beauty of civilization, and on the mystery of time itself. And so, as the sun sets on the Byzantine world, its last flame casts a gentle glow, an invitation to listen closely, to remember deeply, and to find within the ashes the seeds of a new beginning, forever entwined with the sacred journey of humanity. Though the walls of Constantinople fell and the empire dissolved into the folds of history, the spirit of Byzantium did not vanish. It transformed, like a river flowing beneath the earth, carving new channels through the landscapes of culture, faith, and identity. The legacy of the Byzantine Empire returned not as a shadow, but as a vital force, shaping the world in ways subtle and profound. In the Orthodox Christian faith, Byzantium lives on in liturgies sung with the same sacred cadence that once filled Hagia Sophia, in icons painted with the reverence and symbolism that sustained a civilization. The churches, monasteries, and rituals keep alive a continuity that spans centuries, a sacred thread binding past and present. Byzantine art and architecture whisper their influence in the domes and mosaics of Orthodox churches around the world, reminding us that beauty and faith are intertwined. The empire's law and governance echo through the principles of modern statecraft, while its scholarship laid foundations for the Renaissance and beyond, seeding the revival of classical wisdom. Even in the modern city of Istanbul, once Constantinople, the mingling of cultures, religions, and histories echoes the empire's role as a bridge between East and West. The ancient stones, worn by centuries, still hold the stories of empires risen and fallen, inviting us to remember the cycles of history and the enduring quest for meaning. This return is not a mere nostalgic glance backward, but a living dialogue with our own time, a reminder that the past is never truly gone, but continually reborn in the hopes, struggles, and dreams of each generation. Byzantium's story invites us to ponder the delicate dance of continuity and change, the interplay of memory and identity. And so, as we stand at the crossroads of history, the echoes of Byzantium call to us, whispering timeless truths about power and faith, loss and resurrection, the mortal and the divine. It is a call to listen deeply, to honor the past, and to carry forward the sacred flame into the unfolding story of humanity. As centuries stretch onward, the ruins of Byzantium stand in quiet witness, stone sentinels cradling the weight of memory beneath skies that have watched empires rise and fall. The shattered mosaics and fallen columns do not cry out. They speak in silence, inviting the soul to listen with reverence to the stories etched into their very bones. In this stillness, time folds upon itself, the past a living presence, the present a fragile breath, and the future a mystery yet unwritten. The ruins are a sacred space where history dissolves into myth, where the mortal and the eternal meet in whispered conversation. Walking through these ancient streets, one feels the pulse of countless lives. Emperors who dreamed of divine order, monks who guarded fragile knowledge by candlelight, soldiers who stood steadfast against the tide of conquest. Their stories ripple through the air like echoes of a distant hymn, a sacred lament for the beauty and fragility of human endeavor. Yet the ruins are not merely monuments to loss. They are symbols of endurance, reminders that even in decay, there is grace. Even in silence, there is voice. They teach us that memory is a sacred flame to be tended, a bridge between what was and what may yet be. As night falls and stars emerge, the city breathes one last time, a quiet exhale into the cosmos. Byzantium's soul lingers in the twilight, a luminous thread woven through the vast tapestry of history, inviting us to pause, to reflect, and to honor the eternal journey of civilization. And in this sacred silence, the story remains, waiting to be heard, felt, and carried onward. In the delicate quiet between past and present, Byzantium's story continues to murmur, a gentle whisper carried on the winds of time. It is not a tale frozen in dusty tomes or forgotten archives, but a living dialogue, a mirror held up to our own restless age, reflecting timeless truths about power, faith, and the fragile beauty of human endeavor. The empire's rise and fall remind us that no greatness is immune to decay, that the mightiest walls cannot shield against the inward shadows of division, pride, or complacency. Yet within this cycle lies a profound hope, the possibility of renewal through humility, wisdom, and the courage to embrace change. Byzantium teaches us about the sacred balance between earthly ambition and spiritual devotion, between governance and grace. It invites us to ponder how we shape our communities, how we preserve knowledge, and how we honor the legacies we inherit. The mosaics and icons, the chants and prayers, are not relics of a distant past, but vibrant symbols urging us to seek the divine amid the mundane, to find meaning beyond the material, and to nurture the inner light that connects all humanity. As we face our own crossroads of culture, faith, and identity, the whisper of Byzantium calls us to listen deeply, to learn from the echoes of history, and to carry forward its sacred flame with reverence and courage. In this ongoing journey, we become both heirs and storytellers, weaving our own threads into the endless tapestry of time. As the sun dips low beyond the horizon, casting a golden hue upon the worn stones of ancient Constantinople, the pilgrim begins their final journey, not one of conquest or glory, but of remembrance and reverence. This pilgrimage moves through shadowed alleys and crumbled basilicas, through markets now silent and beneath arches that once echoed with sacred hymns. Each step carries the weight of centuries, a step into a world where past and present merge in the quiet breath between memory, and myth. The air is thick with the scent of incense, the faint echo of chants lingering like a sacred mist, inviting the traveler to touch the intangible essence of Byzantium. Here, the stories of emperors and monks, of battles and betrayals, of faith kindled and tested, are woven into the very stones like invisible mosaics awaiting rediscovery. The pilgrim walks not to conquer, but to listen, to hear the whispered prayers of those who built and defended this empire of spirit and stone. This journey is an act of devotion, a meditation on the impermanence of power and the endurance of meaning. It is a sacred return, a passing through the veil that separates history from legend, life from memory. And as night falls, the pilgrim pauses beneath the vast dome of Hagia Sophia, where light and shadow play upon the ancient walls. A final breath, a quiet exhale, a moment suspended between worlds. Here, the eternal spirit of Byzantium resides, waiting patiently for those who come to remember, to honor, and to carry its light into the unfolding story of humanity. As dawn breaks softly over the horizon, the long shadow of Byzantium stretches across the ages, an eternal flame burning quietly within the tapestry of human history. Though the empire's walls have crumbled and its cities transformed, the essence of Byzantium endures, woven into the cultural, spiritual, and intellectual fabric of the world. This flame flickers not only in the grand cathedrals and scholarly tomes, but also in the hearts of those who seek meaning beyond the transient. It burns in the Orthodox prayers whispered in distant lands, in the delicate artistry of icons that mirror divine light, and in the timeless pursuit of wisdom and justice born from Byzantine thought. Byzantium's legacy is a reminder that civilization is more than the sum of its conquests and decrees. It is the living breath of memory and myth, the sacred dialogue between past and present, the endless dance between decay and renewal. It calls to us across centuries, inviting reflection on the nature of power, faith, and the human spirit. In embracing this legacy, we recognize that history is not merely a chronicle of events, but a sacred journey, a slow unfolding of meaning carried through time by those who listen, remember, and dream. And so, as the sun rises, casting light upon ancient stones and new beginnings alike, Byzantium's flame shines on, an enduring beacon guiding the human soul through the vast, mysterious expanse of time. As twilight deepens and the world softens into shades of dusk, Byzantium retreats behind a veil woven of both history and myth, a realm where fact and legend intertwine like the golden threads of a sacred tapestry. The empire that once stood as a beacon of civilization becomes a symbol as much as a place, a story told in whispers across generations. Here, the line between the tangible and the transcendent blurs. Emperors become archetypes of divine power and mortal frailty. Battles echo as eternal struggles between light and shadow. The city itself lives not only in stone and mortar, but in the collective imagination of humanity. This veil of mystery invites us to approach Byzantium not merely as a chapter in a history book, but as a living myth, a meditation on the human condition, on the cyclical nature of rise and fall, and on the eternal quest for meaning in the face of impermanence. It is a reminder that all civilizations, like all lives, are stories told at the edge of memory, fragile, fleeting, yet charged with profound significance. Through the lens of myth, Byzantium's grandeur and tragedy transform into timeless truths that resonate far beyond its vanished walls. And so, as night enfolds the city in darkness, Byzantium's veil remains, a sacred invitation to explore the depths where history and myth dance together, and where the soul may glimpse the eternal mysteries hidden just beyond our reach. In the stillness that follows the telling, there comes a breath, a final exhale that carries the weight of all that has been spoken, seen, and felt. Byzantium's story, like all great tales, concludes not with an ending but with a pause, a sacred silence inviting reflection on the fragile beauty of mortality and the enduring mystery of legacy. Empires rise and fall, their stones turning to dust beneath the endless sky. Yet within their ruin lies a deeper truth, that to build, to dream, to believe, even for a moment, is to partake in the eternal dance of becoming and unbecoming. Byzantium's glory and decay remind us that life itself is a journey of transformation, a weaving of light and shadow that shapes our shared humanity. This final breath asks us to hold gently what we inherit, the histories, the myths, the echoes of those who came before, and to consider how we too will shape the future story. It calls us to embrace the fleeting nature of power and the permanence of memory, to find meaning not in conquest, but in the quiet acts of faith, art, and love that ripple through time. As the last light fades and the world exhales with us, Byzantium's spirit lingers, a luminous thread connecting past and present, a sacred flame kindled in the heart of human experience. It invites us to walk forward with reverence and courage, carrying the ancient stories as a compass on the endless journey toward understanding, grace, and the eternal. And in that stillness, the story rests, waiting for the next breath, the next telling, the next unfolding of the human saga beneath the stars.